The look on my daughter's face when her own grandmother threw her meticulously baked cupcakes in the trash, then laughed with the rest of the family, is something I will never forget. That day something in me snapped. My 6-year-old Emma had spent her entire Saturday afternoon creating those cupcakes. From the moment she woke me at 7 a.m., a tiny human vibrating with purpose, she was on a mission. She'd insisted on doing most of it herself, convinced she was a master baker after watching those kids' cooking shows. We'd gone to the grocery store on Friday, Emma clutching a printed recipe like it was a treasure map, debating vanilla versus chocolate frosting with the intensity of a seasoned chef. She even used her own allowance to buy those fancy decorating tips and star-shaped sprinkles. My heart squeezed watching her determined little face. Our kitchen was a scene of beautiful chaos that day. Flour dusted her hair like snow, chocolate smudged her cheek. She hummed, completely lost in the magic of measuring and mixing. I watched from the table, coffee in hand, only stepping in for the truly dangerous parts, the oven, the high-speed mixer. But the rest? That was all Emma. She cracked eggs with surgical precision, even fishing out shell fragments with her small fingers. When she accidentally added too much vanilla, her eyes went wide, terrified she'd ruined everything. Extra vanilla just means extra flavor, sweetheart, I'd assured her, and her relief was palpable. The batter went into the tins with such care, her tongue poking out between her teeth as she tried to make each one perfectly even. She set the timer herself, punching the numbers with proud little thumps. While they baked, filling our apartment with a warm vanilla embrace, she tackled the frosting. Powdered sugar exploded, coating her nose and eyelashes like a tiny joyful ghost. She giggled, absolutely delighted by the mess. Decorating took the longest. Each cupcake received individual attention, alternating vanilla and chocolate. Those special tips creating what she called fancy swirls like on TV. The sprinkles, scattered with an artist's eye for color, made them truly hers. By 2 p.m., 24 cupcakes cooled on the counter. They weren't from a professional bakery. Some leaned, the frosting varied, a few sprinkles had gone rogue. But to Emma they were edible masterpieces. Her face, radiant with accomplishment, beamed in the 20 photos I took of her posing beside them. She made me promise to send copies to her grandparents before they saw the real thing. The kitchen, by the way, was a disaster zone. Flour everywhere, bowls stacked, frosting inexplicably on the ceiling. Emma wanted to leave it all as proof of her hard work. All afternoon she kept going back to them, rearranging them on the tray, debating which flavor should go where, even suggesting little labels. She changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a purple dress with white flowers. Formal but not too formal, she declared. She practiced her entrance in our living room, walking with an empty tray, perfecting her smile and the announcement, "I made dessert for everyone." In the car, Emma clutched the tray on her lap, barely breathing, rigid with responsibility. She asked a dozen anxious questions. What if Grandma already made dessert? What if no one wants them? What if they're too full? I reassured her every time, explaining everyone would be thrilled. My parents' house, same as it always was. My father with his standard firm handshake, my mother with her critical gaze. My sister Vanessa, the golden child, already there with her husband Patrick and their 9-year-old twins. Vanessa, whose life screamed perfection, the big house, the luxury SUV, the curated Instagram. My mother loved to highlight her achievements, usually while subtly reminding me of my own smaller apartment or older car. Emma always tried with the twins, Jason and Tyler. She'd bring toys, suggest games, her natural friendliness seeking connection. But they were polite, well-trained dogs, performing on command, never genuinely warm. They tolerated her for minutes before returning to their own competitive worlds. I'd seen her optimism chipped away, rejection after rejection, yet she always tried again. Emma carried that tray through the foyer with such delicate steps, the pride practically radiating off her. Dinner flowed as always, my father pontificating, Patrick agreeing, my mother orchestrating with military precision. Vanessa and I slipped into our familiar roles, her the accomplished, me the adequate. Emma sat beside me, unusually quiet, her eyes glued to the kitchen doorway where her cupcakes waited. She wanted the anticipation to build, she'd said. Dessert came last. When the main course plates were cleared, Emma slid from her chair, her cue. She disappeared into the kitchen, and then I heard her careful footsteps returning. She came through the doorway holding the tray in both hands, arms trembling slightly, but her face was pure, unadulterated joy. The tray made it halfway to the table before my mother stood. In 4 swift steps she met Emma. Without a word she took the tray. Emma's smile grew even wider, thinking Grandma wanted to help, wanted to present her hard work. But my mother pivoted, not towards the table, but towards the kitchen. I heard the trash can lid open. Then the sound of ceramic being set down on the counter. And then the unmistakable thud, thud, thud. 24 small thuds in rapid succession. She returned empty-handed. Emma stood frozen, confusion clouding her face, slowly replaced by a dawning horror. My mother looked at her, her expression chillingly familiar. The same one she'd worn throughout my childhood whenever I'd failed to meet her impossible standards. Try again when you're older and actually know what you're doing. The words were flat, factual, like stating the sky was blue. Emma's face, it literally crumbled, like a sandcastle dissolving under an unexpected wave. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. The light in her eyes extinguished completely. Then the tears came, silent rivers streaming down her cheeks as her small body began to shake. My father's voice cut through the silence before I could move. Yeah, those looked awful anyway. He barely glanced up, dismissing 5 hours of a child's passionate labor with the same indifference he'd show unsolicited mail. Vanessa's sharp, bright laugh erupted. My dog wouldn't even eat those, she announced, looking directly at Emma's devastated face. The twins, sensing their mother's amusement, joined in, oblivious. Patrick chuckled, going along with the room's mood. My mother settled back in her seat, a look of satisfied accomplishment on her face. My father was already asking Patrick about politics. They'd moved on. Just like that. To them it was over. A minor interruption quickly resolved. They genuinely didn't understand what they'd done wrong. In their world they'd simply been honest. Taught a child a harsh lesson. Effort doesn't always equal success. I'd witnessed this pattern my entire life. My mother's cutting remarks, delivered with the conviction that honesty trumped kindness. My father's easy reinforcement of her judgments, believing coddling led to weakness. Vanessa, the perfect mimic, weaponizing their cruelty and calling it straight talk. Our family ran on a fuel of casual put-downs and emotional dismissal, everyone participating in tearing each other down under the guise of keeping egos in check. Growing up, I'd internalized it all. My art projects were sloppy. I wasn't smart enough for advanced math. My tastes were wrong. I spent my teenage years and early 20s desperately trying to earn their approval, twisting myself into whatever shape they demanded. My marriage, which they disapproved of, was even an attempt to prove them wrong. When my ex-husband left, their collective "I told you so" was almost a relief for them, validating their original assessment of me. My mother had actually seemed pleased. Emma was my second chance. My chance to build something good, despite their constant pronouncements of my supposed inability to make proper choices. I'd poured myself into motherhood, determined not to repeat their mistakes, choosing encouragement over criticism, praise over perfection. Emma's confidence, her infectious joy, they were a testament to a different kind of parenting. And now she stood there sobbing. Body-racking sobs, her hands covering her face, tears leaking through her fingers, staining her beautiful purple dress. The braids she'd been so proud of now just made her look even smaller, even more vulnerable. Something cold and clear settled over me. It felt like glass, sharp-edged and completely transparent. I could see through it to every single moment of my childhood spent trying to earn approval that never came. Every time I'd been measured against my sister and found wanting. Every casual cruelty dressed up as constructive criticism. Every time I'd swallowed my feelings to keep the peace, to maintain a family unity that apparently only required my silence. I pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood, a sound that cut through the lingering laughter. Everyone fell quiet, turning to look at me. Curiosity from Patrick, irritation from my mother, amusement still on Vanessa's face, indifference from my father. I walked to Emma and took her hand. Her small fingers wrapped around mine, desperate, sticky from the frosting she'd never quite washed off. I squeezed back, then turned to face them. The words came out steady. Each one dropped into the silence with the weight of 32 years of accumulated grievances. We're leaving, I said. And we won't be coming back. Ever. My mother's eyebrows rose, the only indication she'd even heard me. Don't be dramatic, sweetie. She needed to hear the truth. Those cupcakes were a mess. A 6-year-old child spent her entire day. I kept my voice level, trying to do something kind for people who just proved they don't deserve her kindness. She used her own money. She worked for 5 hours. She was proud of what she'd made. And you threw it in the trash without even tasting one. I could tell by looking, my mother said, as if this was an obvious, reasonable statement. She's 6. The words came out harder now, edged with something sharp enough to cut. She's 6 years old, and she tried her best to make something special. And instead of thanking her, or even just politely trying one, you humiliated her. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. You're being oversensitive. It's not that serious. I turned to my sister, truly looked at her. Saw the same smug expression she'd worn when she got me in trouble, when she broke my toys and blamed me when she mocked my friends. 3 decades of being the lesser sibling crystallized into perfect clarity about who she actually was. You laughed at a crying child, I said simply. Your niece. Patrick shifted uncomfortably. The twins had gone quiet, sensing the sudden tension. My father set down his glass with deliberate care. "You're overreacting," he announced. "The girl needed to learn that not everything she does will be praised. That's how the world works." "She's 6, I repeated. "There's teaching resilience and then there's cruelty." What just happened was cruelty. My mother stood again, jaw tight. "I will not be called cruel in my own home. I was being honest. Maybe if you'd heard more honesty growing up, you wouldn't have married that deadbeat who abandoned you." The low blow landed exactly where she'd aimed it. My ex-husband's departure 3 years ago remained her favorite ammunition. Whenever she wanted to remind me of my failures. The divorce was proof in her eyes that I made bad choices, that I wasn't as successful as Vanessa with her intact marriage and big house and perfect twin boys. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly, the calm in my voice a deceptive facade. "I should have heard more honesty growing up. So here's some now." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You're a bitter woman who tears down everyone around her to feel better about herself. Dad's a coward who goes along with it rather than standing up for anyone. And Vanessa? She learned from the best how to be cruel and call it honesty." The silence that followed felt like a physical presence. My mother's face went white, then red. My father looked like I'd slapped him. Vanessa's mouth hung slightly open, shock replacing her earlier amusement. "I've spent 32 years trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it." I continued, years of suppressed feelings finally finding their voice. I thought of my high school graduation, my mother criticizing other families' outfits instead of acknowledging my academic achievements. My college acceptance letters, my father dismissing my excitement because it wasn't Ivy League. Countless birthdays, gifts with commentary about what I should have asked for. My wedding day, my mother pointing out everything wrong, the flowers, the dress, the venue. Even in the photos, you could see the tension in my smile. My desperate attempt to hold on to joy while her criticism echoed in my head. Asterisk, by the way, if you're still with me, soaking up every agonizing detail of this moment, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories are coming, I promise. Asterisk, I thought about Emma's birth, calling them from the hospital, only to be met with disappointment over her gender. "Boys are easier," my mother had said. My father asking if I'd considered a more traditional name. They visited for 20 minutes, left without holding her. These monthly family dinners, they'd been my desperate attempt to maintain a connection, to give Emma a family, to make things better. I'd made excuses for them, convinced myself their generation just showed love differently, that their criticism came from caring. I looked down at Emma, still crying but quieter now, watching me with wide, confused eyes. "But I will not watch you do this to my daughter," I finished, my voice shaking with conviction. "She is good enough. She's better than good enough. She's incredible. And if you can't see that, the problem isn't with her." I pulled Emma closer to my side. She pressed against my leg, her face buried in my hip. "We're leaving right now," I announced. "And I want to be extremely clear about what happens next. You will never see Emma again. You will never see me again. Don't call. Don't text. Don't show up at my apartment. We're done." My mother's face cycled through emotions. Shock, then calculation, then indignation. "How dare you speak to me like this?" she hissed. "After everything I've done for you, all the sacrifices I made raising you, this is how you repay me? By cutting me off from my granddaughter over some rejected cupcakes." The word rejected rather than destroyed or trashed was telling. In her mind, she'd simply declined dessert, not humiliated a child. Vanessa found her voice, standing with dramatic flair. "You've lost your mind. Seriously, have you heard yourself? You sound insane. Over cupcakes. This is the most ridiculous overreaction I've ever witnessed." Patrick nodded in sync, though his expression was uneasy. The twins remained frozen, eyes wide. "You can't be serious," my mother reiterated. "Over some cupcakes?" "No," I stated, pulling Emma gently towards the door. "Over a pattern of behavior I should have confronted years ago. The cupcakes were just the final straw." "This is ridiculous," Vanessa shrieked. "You're throwing away your family over nothing. I'm protecting my daughter from people who would treat her the way you just did. That's not nothing. That's everything." My father's voice came low and hard. "If you walk out that door, don't expect an apology later. We won't come crawling." "Good," I said without looking back. "Don't." I turned and walked towards the foyer, Emma's hand still firmly in mine. Behind us, voices erupted. My mother calling me ungrateful, Vanessa screaming about my insanity, Patrick's quieter voice trying to mediate. I didn't stop. I grabbed Emma's jacket and my purse. The evening air hit my face when we stepped outside, cool and clean. Emma climbed into her car seat without a word. Her tears had slowed, but her breathing came in those stuttering gasps that follow hard crying. I sat in the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine immediately. The house behind us glowed, silhouettes visible through the windows. My entire family continuing their evening while we sat in darkness. My hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a trembling awareness of what I'd just done. I'd severed ties with my entire family in one decisive moment. There would be no going back. I'd drawn a line so absolute, crossing it would be impossible. Part of me wanted to feel regret. Shouldn't I feel something other than this strange sense of lightness? These were my parents, my only sister, the people who'd raised me. Cutting them off completely felt like the nuclear option. But another part of me, the part that had watched Emma's face crumble, felt nothing but certainty. They'd had 32 years to treat me better. They'd had 6 years to treat Emma better. Tonight wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of decades of small cruelties, the final straw. Emma's quiet voice came from the back seat. "Mommy, are you sad?" I turned to look at her. This small person who'd become wise beyond her years through no fault of her own. Her eyes were still red-rimmed, but her concern was focused entirely on me. "I'm so sorry that happened, baby," I said. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Why did Grandma throw them away? How do you explain casual cruelty to a 6-year-old? Sometimes people have meanness inside them," I said carefully. "And instead of fixing it, they give it to other people. That's what Grandma did tonight." "I worked really hard," Emma whispered. "But they weren't good enough." The statement broke something inside my chest. This was how it started. The first crack in her confidence, the first time she'd learned to doubt herself because of someone else's cruelty. If I didn't handle this exactly right, she'd carry this moment forward. "Your cupcakes were more than good enough," I said firmly. "They were made with love and effort and pride. The problem wasn't your cupcakes, sweetie. The problem was the people we gave them to." Emma considered this, her face scrunched in thought. "Are we really never going back?" "Really never," I confirmed. "Not even for Christmas." She nodded slowly, processing. "Okay." I started the car and pulled away. In my rearview mirror, my parents' house grew smaller, the warm light from its windows receding into darkness. We stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Emma looked confused when I parked but followed me inside. I led her to the bakery section and told her to pick out any cake she wanted. She chose one with pink frosting and rainbow sprinkles, just like hers. Back at our apartment, I set the cake on our small kitchen table. "We're celebrating," I announced. "Celebrating what?" she asked, uncertain. "Your hard work. Your beautiful cupcakes. Your kind heart that wanted to make something special for people who didn't deserve it." We ate enormous slices of cake at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. Emma's spirits gradually lifted, chocolate frosting collecting at the corners of her mouth. She told me about each cupcake she'd made, describing them in detail as if they still existed. After she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with my phone. 7 missed calls from my mother. 12 texts from Vanessa, ranging from calling me insane to desperate guilt trips. 2 texts from my father, both telling me I was being childish. The messages kept coming, my phone buzzing with their attempts to regain control. I blocked all 3 numbers, watching each contact disappear with a sense of finality. Then I called my best friend, Monica. She arrived 40 minutes later with a bottle of wine and listened without interruption. When I finished, she hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you," she said. "That took guts. I should have done it years ago." "Maybe," she replied. "But you did it when it mattered most, when it was about protecting Emma." The next morning, Emma woke up subdued. I made her favorite breakfast, and we ate in comfortable silence. Around mid-morning, she looked up from her coloring book. "Can we make more cupcakes?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. "Can we give them to people who will like them?" "That's the best idea I've heard all day." We spent Sunday afternoon baking again. This time with no pressure, no anxiety about meeting anyone's standards. We made chocolate cupcakes with vanilla frosting, and Emma decorated them with even more enthusiasm than before. She'd learned from her first attempt, applying the frosting more evenly, being more careful with the sprinkles. When they were done, we boxed them up and walked to our apartment building's common room. An elderly woman, Mrs. Patterson, lived 3 doors down. Emma often chatted with her. We knocked and Emma presented her with 6 cupcakes. Mrs. Patterson's face lit up like someone had handed her gold. She tried one immediately, closing her eyes and making exaggerated sounds of pure enjoyment. "These are absolutely delicious," she declared. "Did you make these yourself, Emma?" My daughter beamed, nodding enthusiastically. We distributed the rest to other neighbors, to Monica and her husband, to Emma's teacher. Every single person thanked Emma, genuinely complimented her baking, made her feel proud. By the time we returned to our apartment, Emma was practically floating. In the following weeks, my mother tried various tactics to reestablish contact. She showed up at my apartment once, but I didn't answer. Cards came in the mail which I threw away unopened. She even found my work email, sending long accusatory messages about how I was unreasonable, how family was supposed to forgive, how I was keeping her from her granddaughter over one mistake. I didn't respond. Vanessa tried a different approach, messaging through mutual friends, calling me insane, trying guilt trips. I told those friends to stop passing messages or they'd be cut off too. She even created fake social media accounts to monitor my posts, which I only discovered months later. My father made no further attempts after those initial texts. His silence somehow felt more damning than my mother's persistence. 3 months later, Emma had a birthday party. She turned 7, surrounded by school friends, by Monica's family, by neighbors who'd become like surrogate grandparents. We had cupcakes, ones Emma had helped make again. Everyone ate them and told her they were wonderful. She blew out her candles with a smile that reached her eyes. No shadow of that devastating evening hung over her anymore. She'd learned a hard lesson about cruelty, yes, but she'd also learned something more important. That her mother would protect her, that her worth wasn't determined by people who chose to tear her down, that there were people in the world who would appreciate her efforts. 6 months after the incident, my company transferred me to a different state. New job, better pay, a fresh start. I didn't tell my parents we were moving. They found out through one of those mutual friends, someone who saw my moving announcement on social media, before I'd thought to restrict my privacy settings. My mother sent one final email to my work address before we left. It was long, detailing all the ways I'd been a difficult child, how she tried her best, how disappointed she was that I turned out so vindictive. She ended it by saying she forgave me and hoped I'd eventually grow up enough to apologize. I deleted it without finishing. Emma thrived in our new city. She made friends easily, joined a junior baking club at the local community center, and started talking about becoming a chef. She occasionally mentioned her grandparents, asking why we didn't see them anymore. I answered honestly in age-appropriate ways, explaining that sometimes people aren't healthy to have in your life, even if they're family. She seemed to accept this, especially as she got older and could understand more nuance. By the time she was 10, she told me once that she barely remembered them, except for that time Grandma threw away my cupcakes. The memory hadn't traumatized her, partly because I'd handled it the way I did, partly because she'd been young enough that the specifics faded while the lesson remained. I never regretted walking out of that house. I never regretted cutting contact. Some people would probably judge me for it, saying, family is family, and you should always find a way to reconcile. But those people didn't watch their daughter's face crumble, while adults who should have protected her laughed instead. Emma deserved better. And honestly, so did I. The cupcake incident became a story I sometimes told at parties when the conversation turned to family drama. People always reacted the same way. Horrified, supportive, some even admitting they wished they had the courage to set similar boundaries with their own toxic family members. I tell them it wasn't courage, not exactly. It was clarity. That moment when Emma stood sobbing and my family laughed had brought everything into sharp focus. I'd seen them clearly for the first time in my life, without the fog of obligation or the desperate hope that they'd change. And once I saw them clearly, the choice became obvious. Protecting my daughter wasn't brave. It was basic. It was the bare minimum of what a parent should do. I just happened to have parents who'd never learned that lesson themselves. Emma is 14 now. She still bakes, having gotten quite good at it over the years. Her cupcakes are legitimately impressive, the kind you'd find at an upscale bakery. But more importantly, she's confident, creative, kind. She knows her worth because I've spent years building her up instead of tearing her down. Sometimes I wonder what my parents would think if they could see her now. Whether they'd regret their cruelty, whether they'd recognize what they lost when they threw those cupcakes in the trash. But mostly I don't think about them at all. We built our own family, Emma and me. Built it with people who lift each other up, who celebrate effort even when results aren't perfect, who understand that a 6-year-old's crooked cupcakes represent something far more valuable than flawless presentation. Those cupcakes weren't just dessert. They were a test I hadn't known my family was taking. And they failed spectacularly. But Emma and we passed with flying colors. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw such a firm line with family? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.